In my last video, I garnered quite a lot of comments from people who were suggesting, in a roundabout kind of way, that the pressures, obstacles and issues of not only a multicultural society, but a multiracial one, are just too complex to resolve and are in fact insoluble. It seems as they would see it, that people of different races, whatever they are, cannot peacefully and harmoniously live together, and that the most practical, simplest and even the kindest thing to do is for the races to separate and commit to living apart from one another. And although I don't yet agree with them, I do understand their point of view. How could I not, since one of my very best friends also believes this? And as I've said before, there are some very passionate, reasoned and exceptionally persuasive arguments from many other YouTube channels espousing this view. I won't mention them since I do not wish to cause them any negative flack. When I did mention, the iconoclast was removed from YouTube soon after. I sincerely hope that my mentioning his channel had anything to do with his digital evisceration. Since this channel is a minnow, and as it happens getting smaller every day, I don't think it did. But if it did, I am genuinely sorry. My intention, noble as I hope it is merely to expand the conversation. My friend who brought these viewpoints to my attention has said to me that his former self would have believed that his current opinions beyond the pale, but he now believes them to be the only rational way to view the predicament that we are now facing. And I myself have shifted somewhat. Once upon a time, not so long ago, I would never even have given any of these opinions, far right, alt-right, white identitarian, white separatism, white supremacism, call them what you will, even the slightest consideration. I wouldn't have given them a house room. I too would have considered them beyond the pale, so to speak. I would have taken the arrogant, condescending tone of, we don't talk to Nazis, racists, fascists, that so many people still do. But what's the good of that? Do we think if we fail to acknowledge them, that their opinions will vanish in the breeze? Like children who hide their faces and then think that the adults can't see them. Because that is childish, and we must put away childish things, especially if we're going to have a race war on our hands, because that's no place for children. And because it's hardly fair on them, considering that we haven't actually taught them to hate each other yet. And hatred of one another is an important but not necessary part of either extreme of this argument. Black and white can hate each other, but they can still agree to disagree and part company on civil terms. Or they can not hate each other, but still believe that a parting of the ways remains the best option in the long term. Or they can do something that is somewhere between the two. They can do that. Sure they can. But what about those people that have invested in a major way, based on the assumption that race relations, to use an old-fashioned term, will improve over time in an approximately linear fashion, and that the multiracial society, if not actually the multicultural one, is here to stay? So what about them? What about those of us that have black friends or white friends? What about those of us that have black work colleagues or white work colleagues? What about those soldiers who rely on their black comrades or their white comrades to watch their back? And what about those people who have invested more than any of us and have chosen to spend their lives with, marry and have children with black people and white people? I suppose that friends can simply not be friends anymore, if that really was simple. White workplaces could, since they are in the majority, just stop hiring black people once the necessary legislation was passed, allowing them to do so. The same goes for the army and the other armed services, although good luck with trying to place your own prejudices between friendships that have been forged in combat. And I suppose that interracial couples could get divorced and their children, yeah, what about their children? What about them? What are we going to do with them? Because they're not black, but then they aren't white either. Where do they stand? What place for them in our brave new, racially pure utopia? Internment? Concentration camps? Forced infertility? Gas chambers? One of my contributors made a comment in my last video, which became the inspiration for this one. I think it's worth repeating verbatim. I am mixed race, of the blend that probably springs to mind most readily when thinking of such. I have friends, not acquaintances, who are avowedly on the alt-right. We don't discuss race much, if at all. When we do, their fears are revealed, and I can't help but lend a sympathetic ear. Much of their fear of mixed-race marriages stem from the very visible fact that often the offspring of such unions identify strongly with the mores and culture of the non-white parent and reject their European heritage. One more foot soldier, eagerly dismantling all they hold dear. I cleave to my European culture. It has shaped me more than many of my wholly European brothers and sisters, and my work as an artist reflects that deep love and appreciation for what my forebears created, much to the delight of my alt-right friends. They deride multiculturalism, much as I do. A bit more gratitude and engagement in the culture we both love is the main thrust of their grievance. I'd never heard such a thing expressed, but it is something I suspected for some while. I remember that Tiger Woods once declared that he wasn't, in fact, black. This caused much consternation with accusations of him denying his heritage. But he was only referring to the fact that though his father was black, his mother was from Thailand. So he was, by definition, if we must define these things, mixed race. He said that he thought that the insistence that he was black most peculiar. The fact that black people wanted to claim him the world's best golfer for themselves is understandable, although they are hardly starved as successful sporting role models. So is this true, my mixed race compatriots? And although I have no illusions about who might be watching this video, I am particularly addressing you, as per the title of this post. Is it true that you celebrate only the non-white half of your heritage? I suspect that it is largely true, and if I may be so bold, I think I know why. I think you do this because you feel that is the half of your heritage that is underappreciated, under threat even. But you are mistaken. British society, or rather I should say, it is the British establishment that also values the non-white part of you. That part is not under threat. It's the white part that is actually in peril. It's the white part that they hate. But they don't hate you, since you are a person of colour, or a POC. To them, the presence of non-white genes absolves you of any of the crimes of the white race. Because that's what BAME is all about. Officially, BAME stands for black and Asian minority ethnic, or black and minority ethnic, it's one or the other. I don't know or care which one. But that's not what it means. That's not what it really means. It might be tempting to imagine that it really stands for blacks against Middle England. But that would be unfair, not only to black people, but also to Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish people. No. What it really means, in essence, is white people against the rest. This nasty little collection of letters is just another wedge hammered into British society, designed to divide white people from everybody else. Because black people are all the same, aren't they? Nigerian black Christians have obviously more in common with Nigerian black Muslims than they might have with white Christians. Obviously, despite the fact that they are in actual deadly conflict in Nigeria. But to the patronising and self-loathing white civil servants who came up with this piece of official state-sanctioned hate speech, the important thing is to get all the white people on one side of the wedge and all the non-white people on the other. And then they wonder why there's a growing movement of white identitarians. Not only are these people hateful, but they're also astonishingly stupid, as usual. But you, my mixed race siblings, should be particularly alarmed by this strategy. For you are the ones, more than any others, that do literally have skin in the game. Either your mothers or your fathers are going to fall victim either to the anti-white bile of Black Lives Matter and backed up by the establishment, or to the inevitable anti-black backlash that will most certainly come if the indigenous white population continues to be goaded and provoked as they have been of late. So who's it going to be? Who are you going to stand up for? Your mother or your father? In the time of Black Lives Matter, you know it can't be both. Black Lives Matter will insist it should be your black parent, and the white identitarian backlash will equally insist it should be the white one. So if you are mixed race, and you have been enjoying the cultural cachet that comes with your non-traditional background, you might want to think about how you, more than any of us, can make things better. If you've been basking in the mainstream media's adulation of you as a type, a stereotype even, for a heritage that you had no control over, you might want to ponder what your responsibilities are. Your responsibilities to a culture and to a society that has nurtured you thus far. Or even if your racial mix has made you feel awkward and with a confused sense of where you belong. Ask yourself, sincerely, whether you think that this society, this chiefly white society, is more likely to reject you or to accept you as a native-born son or daughter. And ask yourself, like the mixed-race contributor above, whether you cleave to your ethnic or your British heritage, and whether it is right for you to favour one over the other, or even if it is right to favour both evenly. Because is it India, a far-off African nation, or some Caribbean paradise that has fed and clothed you and kept you safe all your natural-born days? Whatever romantic attachment you may have to the lands of your parents or your grandparents, I would argue that those places are not your homeland. This is. This peaceful and prosperous, quirky and ramshackle, rainy but nevertheless beautiful island in the North Atlantic is your home. There are some, and many more since Black Lives Matter started swinging their hateful wrecking ball, that will never see you as British. And they have their reasons. Chief amongst them is the one my contributor friend has highlighted above. But there are many, many more who desperately want you to feel a sense of belonging. Here, with us, and amongst us. Survey after survey backs this assumption up. You don't need to be white to be British. But we need your help, my mixed race cousins. We, the white British population, need to hear that what Black Lives Matter so confidently declares to be true is not so, that you don't hate us, for we don't hate you. But unless you start calling out Black Lives Matter's lies for what they are, and that they do not speak in your name, that may change. Many white people who were previously relaxed and comfortable with black people in their midst are looking over their shoulders and are increasingly wary, perhaps of causing offence, but also of sensing a feeling of distrust. Black Lives Matter has done that. Black Lives Matter has undone in 2 months what was achieved in terms of decades. Because this is serious. It really is. The other day I tuned into a debate that was promoted as being between inclusive patriotism and exclusive patriotism. On one side was a guy called Ricky Doolan, who I had witnessed being quite eloquent in his defence of Churchill's statue, and a young woman called Laura Towler, who has made some excellent YouTube videos. It was brought to my attention by a patriotic British black woman who I follow on Twitter. Like me, she thought that this event was an occasion to air a difficult discussion, and one that has been conspicuously missing from a hopelessly biased mainstream. Sadly, rather than bring any clarity to the arguments, it very quickly descended into a slanging match about who was the worst group, and finally ended in farce when the moderator called Doolan a twat. But despite wanting what one might call the civic nationalism of Doolan to carry the day, it was the ethnic nationalist Laura Towler who put up the best performance. She was composed and clear in her arguments, whereas Doolan was over-emotional and resorted to name-calling. But it wasn't just that she was the best debater and that the Doolan underestimated her. She had some pretty compelling arguments. Chief amongst these was that on current trends, it must be stressed, white British people will be a minority by 2060. Does that matter? In a previous time, and not so long ago, I would have said no. I would have said that it was inevitable. But there is nothing inevitable about things that have yet to happen. And I have to say, considering the chaos that Black Lives Matter have brought to our society in 2 short months, even I am feeling a little queasy about that. Quite what the aforementioned patriotic British black woman must have thought about civic nationalism, which includes her, losing out to the more brutal ethnic kind, which very definitely doesn't. I shudder to imagine. Because this appears to me that unless we can all find a way to accommodate the different ethnicities that, like it or not, make up this country, it is going to get brutal. It's going to get very brutal indeed. Unless we can find a way through this Pandora's box that Black Lives Matter have ripped open. Whilst we all have been quietly pretending there wasn't even a box there, it seems we will have 2 choices. Either a country run exclusively for the benefit of all the assorted Britain-hating ethnicities, with Islam likely to dominate, and at the expense of the white population, or a white nationalist ethno-state. And man, what a choice. What a fucking choice. And 2060, that's within my daughter's lifetimes. And whilst I don't agree in principle with the ethno-staters, Laura Towler did raise a very, very good point in response to a question about illegal immigration. Whilst illegal immigration is currently a hot topic, thanks to Nigel Farage highlighting the thousands coming over from France in rubber dinghies, illegal immigration remains, as Ms Towler put it, a drop in the ocean compared to legal immigration, which even conservative estimates have it running at 250,000 every year for the past 20 years. That's an extra 5 million people. And whilst not all of those are the Britain-hating Islamists that are the stuff of our nightmares, some of them will be. And we don't know how many. And with the higher birth rates of those from the developing world, we will have less and less control over how many British-born Britain haters are raised here. So, I would say, much as I hate to, that it is the responsibility of you guys and gals, you, the very human products of our multiracial society, who can speak with more authority than any of us. You exist. There are some, perhaps many, and certainly more than there were 10 weeks ago, who would prefer it if you didn't exist, because building an ethno-state is a lot easier without millions of mixed-race people muddying the waters. You exist, and you are proof of the inherent goodness of all shades of people. Your parents, different as they were, saw something of value in each other. Even if it was only fleeting, even if it was only a sexual attraction, it was something. Now I don't want to get too kumbaya about this, or even I want to buy the world a Coke, but you do exist. A power higher than us has decreed that you should exist. So what human being has a right to deny you that? You are a human being as much as any of us are, and you must claim that right. To proclaim, as a product of two ethnicities, two cultures and two civilizations, that you have a right to exist. But how about championing the British, the white British side of your biology for once? After all, we white British are people too.